This is the unrestricted free agent.
The Jimbo Fisher stuff. Were you in the room the other day when he threw?
I was. Part of the reason we had so much fun being Clemson was because we used to talk a lot of shit to them and they couldn't handle it.
You feel fine, but your hands are shaking.
Coach Spurrier couldn't give a damn.
I want to take these athletes and mentor them.
Why can't the Gamecocks win at the SEC tournament?
So sunny all the time, so hot.
Too sunny.
Too sunny.
Fans are going to be fans, and people who understand the sport are going to talk sports.
With some weird dynamics.
It's going to be painful, but I think at the end of the day, we'll be stronger people for it.
Last Friday, before college football kicks off at large, and we even got college football this weekend. So if you need to be pumped up this morning, if you need to feel even better, I don't know if I can help you out there. 8 days away now to be a non-countdown guy, and I've started nearly every show this week being a countdown guy. That's where I'm at. How about you? Hope you're feeling well. And to me, it continues to get more and more real as we're closer and closer to college football now. And have you seen some of these games this weekend? The Northwestern Nebraska one is the headliner for sure, the 12:30 game on Fox. But a couple of ACC schools are even kicking off. Another Big Ten school in Illinois. North Carolina is hosting Florida A&M, and Florida State randomly hosting as well. I think I saw earlier, Duquesne. I didn't know Duquesne had a football team. Good basketball school. No clue Duquesne had a football team. But this is that weird, whoever came up with week 0, right? Week 0 is the worst. If you play, it's your first week. And I'm happy college football is going to be here tomorrow. I'm going to be watching. But it's just odd that some schools start a week ahead and then everybody else gets going the next week. It doesn't make much sense to me. So that's how I'll start this morning, telling you how excited I am and then complaining. How about that? Morning to you too, DC. First one in this morning at 7:35. Attaboy. Anybody else get annoyed, he says. So he's starting off that way as well. When somebody says Beamer ball, that was kind of his dad's thing. That's the first I'm hearing of it. DC, first I'm hearing of someone being annoyed that Beamer ball is not looked at as a positive maybe, or you don't feel like it's unique to South Carolina. I can see that. But I think it's one of the ultimate compliments because Beamer ball at Virginia Tech was really, really good. So I think you gotta let that one go, DC. Just take it as a compliment, man. And understand Shane's doing it his own way too. That's one of the biggest compliments I think we can pay him, but it's true. Like, he's definitely not a carbon copy of his dad. He doesn't seem to be. He never says that, right? We're setting this program up like my dad used to do it. I mean, Will Muschamp and nearly everyone that coached with Nick Saban admits, yep, we're doing it like we know how the best does it, so we're setting it up like that. And that just didn't work in college football. More than any other organization, sports organization, sports entity, you got to be unique in college football. You got to have a shot. And Shane Beamer and South Carolina clearly are. Kirby, good morning to you, sir. Finally Friday. Attaboy, you made it. And you got college football tomorrow. That's got to feel good. We got college football on Thursday night next week. We had it. We had the NFL last night a little bit. Watched a little bit of Kansas City paying tribute to Lynn Dawson with the huddle to start. Saw a little bit of the Packers. Was that Packers Chiefs last night? There was one other game I was going back and forth to. Oh, they had the Amazon game, right? Which is weird to me. We do have the Amazon Prime at my house. but to watch live football on there was odd. Yeah, Troy, I'm with you, man. Just a thought. I hate the term week 0, but I like calling next week week 1. So why don't we call this week week half? Oh, that's even worse. I'm guessing that's what you mean, right? Not 1 out of 2. Yeah, there's no way around it, right? That is a great example to me of where college football is. Can you imagine the NFL doing that? All right, here's week 1, but we're going to have a few special games the week before. No, everybody lockstep, move forward, one group, whole thing. Oh, well. Again, it's part of the beauty of college football as well. It is. Everything is just, it is non-uniform, right? It is non-corporate standard. It is no, by God, this is the way we've done it at our school. We're going to do it like this. Or nope, we're getting paid a ridiculous amount of money, so absolutely we're going to do it this way. And you can't tell me we're not. I mean, that's what a lot of FCS schools are doing this week, right? Getting the paycheck. That's what Duquesne is doing, going to Tallahassee, Florida A&M, up to North Carolina. Why, I mean, how could you not in their shoes? Chris, good morning to you, sir, on the Facebook live stream. Morning, fellow Gamecocks. Let's start with last night's first Shane Beamer call-in radio show, where you're going to get the latest injury updates week in and week out on a Thursday night. Really last public comments you get from Shane Beamer, unless ESPN is doing a game or SEC Network or whatever, and they'll stick the mic in his face, and then I guess he'll do the exclusive radio pregame interview as well. But really the last time we hear about an injury update officially. And it looks like Corey Rucker will not play, if I am reading the tea leaves right. Shane Beamer, I think, specifically saying he's worried. He's most worried about Corey Rucker not playing. I think there's a foot injury there to the wide receiver transfer from Arkansas State on the preseason Bolitnikoff Award watch list. Not something you would prefer. A couple other injuries updated. Kai Kroger, most notably the punter. Shane Beamer is optimistic that he will be back for the open 1 week from tomorrow, 7:30. Josh weighing in with a good morning to the UFAs. And yes, Chris, we'll get that. And yeah, I thought week 0 was a sports-a-rama type thing, DC. No. That's the jamboree stuff, right? That's how it used to be. There used to be a bunch of jamborees where a bunch of high schools would gather. You play a half typically, and everybody's in one spot, feeling good about football season, just working some stuff out. Nope, not how it is anymore. Everybody in high school football is going on to play their second game tonight, by and large. Yeah, and Josh is like, how he just casually dropped the Rucker news. Yeah, that has been interesting. But college football coaches all across everywhere, they do it, don't they? Just, oh yeah, by the way, one guy that people might have been really, really excited about, probably not going to play. And it's been going on for weeks now. So if you're looking for complete transparency from your college football coach, you ain't going to get it. You're just not. But that's I would say, compared to most college football programs, the Gamecocks towards the top. It seems like, anyway, from what we know, from what we've been told, seem to have got through preseason camp pretty healthy. Chad Terrell, the one torn ACL, out for the season news. Poor kid, third torn ACL, brutal. But if you're just looking at from a proven production standpoint, or even from a potential standpoint, it looks like there's near 100% participation heading into week number 1. Anywhere close to number 1, 100% is fantastic. Used to the show being at 7, so does that mean it's now at 6? Is that what you're saying, DC? Did it move up an hour? Interesting. Beamer is sneaky, but not like the slimy Muschamp. One way to put it. Okay. And Chris says he was more excited to see Juice Wells play than Corey Rucker. And Kirby also getting used to the new schedule. That's all part of the first week, right? That's one of the reasons why Shane Beamer and company did that with the team. Have a rough draft week, a walkthrough week. Fans the same way. But that leads us to a little bit of a fill-in-the-blank Friday. What I'm looking forward to most this college football season is today's fill-in-the-blank Friday with college football games going on tomorrow. Felt like this was a good time to get this out there. Early answer in from AJ on Twitter. Going to Williams-Brice with my daughters. Go Cox. AJ, going to kick us off the right way with that response. Appreciate that on Twitter at Tim Hill UFA, where you can find me there. All over the social media, same kind of deal. TimHillUFA.com is the actual website. What I'm looking forward to most this college football season is. So I'm guessing that one might be a perennial one for AJ. Not specific to this year, or maybe his daughters have just gotten to the age where it's especially fun. I can understand that. I think this year for my older two, 9 and 7, it will be a little bit more fun than it has been a chore previously, a little bit more independent. The night games not quite as rough on the schedule as they have been in years past. So I'm definitely looking forward to having my sons there, but that includes also being with extended family. My dad, my sisters get into it as well. So I got nieces and nephews too. So that family environment is way up on the list. But when I see this question, my brain doesn't go there because that's almost like a given. When I see this college football season, that's where my word nerd brain goes. So, all right, what's unique about this one compared to other? Good morning to you, Hope. Happy Friday as well. Glad you're part of the program. What I'm looking forward to most, other than my team, Troy says. That's very kind of him, not even to write in that his team is Clemson, right? I appreciate that about you, Troy. Alabama, Texas A&M, October 8th. What he's looking forward to most this college football season. Excellent answer. Very unique, right? This season, that game, because of what happened this offseason. Totally get that, man. When you can blow the nose in the show less than 15 minutes in, good start. Good to go. Chris says, I'm looking forward to seeing my daughter cheer on the sidelines at Williams-Brice Stadium again this year, spending time with family and friends. And to me, that's why college football will forever be undefeated in my brain, in my life. You could certainly argue the NFL product with parity, with the way they set it up, the draft every year, the scheduling. Your organization is probably going to have more of a chance to win a championship in the NFL than your college football team will have a chance to win a national championship. That's just what it is, right? But that doesn't make it more special. It's the tradition year in and year out. And the family connection, I think that a lot of us do identify with from the college football standpoint. I certainly do. And you just can't replicate that. You just can't do it. So got that fill in the blank Friday up and rolling on Twitter. Love to hear more of your thoughts as we roll on this morning on the live chat there. You guys going to go out of your way to watch football tomorrow? Because it's I shouldn't say just football. It's college football, but it's not your team, most likely. I don't think we have any resident Northwestern or Nebraska fans in here on a regular basis. Might be your last Saturday to knock out the honeydew list, the summer projects, everything that needed to get done. So I get it. I'm certainly not building my day around college football tomorrow. I got 4 practices with my kids running all over the place. So we'll be busy with that, and then we'll get to some football maybe. Certainly check out probably, I think the way my schedule works out tomorrow, we'll be able to get the end, maybe mid-third quarter. I'll get to that Northwestern Nebraska game, hoping it's still a game, and I'll be just fine with that. DC says it's been a long summer with the baseball team being down. Just give me anything. College football. That mean you're all in on a game day-like routine tomorrow, DC? You're up early watching pregame coverage on your couch, glued to it with, again, let's go through some of these games. Nebraska Northwestern on Fox, 12:30. Actually, noon.
Metaportal Go. Look professional.
We're jamming here on a ESPN.com ad. Sorry about that. So 12:30 Fox, Nebraska Northwestern is the game, right? The one over in Ireland. They're supposed to do this last year before. COVID kept that from happening. That will be unique, no doubt, but it's not even the first game of the college football season, technically, because at noon on CBS Sports Network, this is where you are an absolute diehard if you're tuning in at noon to watch the first kickoff of the 2022 college football season. If you can tell me who's playing, I'm really impressed. Or really impressed / concerned. Austin Peay and Western Kentucky. Noon, CBS Sports Network. So then you got the big Fox game that most of us will be checking out. In Nebraska, an 11.5-point favorite. Wow. Let's see. Do we know? I know I touched on it a couple of weeks ago. Do we know that Ryan Helinski is going to be the guy for Northwestern? We'll check into that here in a second. It wasn't pretty last year for Helinski and Northwestern. And I was reading an article on them and how they are Auburn-esque in a lot of ways. Like it's Big Ten Division Championship and then 2-win season. And it just roller coasters for Northwestern a lot. I'm looking it up right now. Northwestern QB. Let's see what we got. Nothing pops up immediately. Not naming quarterback. One of those. Yep, that's where we are. Not naming the starting quarterback until kickoff. Never good stuff. Never. Does that ever work out? You guys got examples of that? So Helinski started 5 games last year. The front runner. 3 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. I forget. There were people last year talking about how he was going to throw for 20 touchdowns and how he didn't get a fair shake at South Carolina and the whole thing. It amazes me every year how fans digest college football. It's amazing to me. I mean, the fact that you can't explain struggles at quarterback, especially from a South Carolina perspective, simply as he's not a great quarterback. I think because there's so many people who invest in all this recruiting stuff and just buy into the hype. Unfortunately, for Ryan Helinski, it seems like he's not a very good college quarterback. And I get all the hype. He was a 4-star prospect coming from California. I mean, tremendous face of the program type guy, right? Good personality, really well-spoken. Parents moved with him. We know the Helinski hope and the foundation and all the work for mental health and the family story. Tremendously impactful, I think, and it's impossible not to pull for a kid in a family like that in a lot of ways. It just hadn't been very good, unfortunately, on the football field. And not being named the starter at Northwestern this year, not a great sign for the future. Good for you, Troy. I will watch football all day Saturday. Good question, DC. Oh, Troy says yes, 10 to 12. So back to the old schedule. College game day tomorrow on ESPN. Are they over in Ireland, Troy? Do you know? It'd be good for them. It'd be a heck of a way to start the season. Herb Street, man, he doesn't mind traveling at all, does he? So I remember seeing the news, but last night it was still a little jarring at first when Al Michaels was doing the game. First of all, just to have a game on Amazon to me doesn't make sense. That's where I go to check out what I watched the terminal list there most recently. There's some decent stuff that's popped up on Prime, but it's always been like a binge show. I'm watching The Chosen on there now. Just started that. I think 4 episodes in. Highly recommend it. Sounds like Muschamp's game time decision chess match with the Ryan Helinski waiting until kickoff. Yeah, good luck with that. Morning to you, Jason. DC says, nice. I'll be watching all day too, Troy. All college football. I like it. But back to where I was going with that. My train of thought, lost it for a second reading you guys' comments. So Al Michaels on the call made the move over from, it was NBC's the Sunday night primetime game, right? I mean, Al Michaels is getting close to 80 years old. But paired now with Kirk Herbstreit in that game. So it took my brain a little while. I know they've had a crossover game or two through the years, but Herbstreit now is doing that one, I think. He's got that one for the season, or a large part of it anyway. Thursday night NFL games combined with his crazy schedule on Saturday, which includes being at College game day and then going to the primetime game that night. I assume he's still doing that. I don't think you'd want to not do that. But it's basically him and the Bear there. They have the producer for the College game day hopping on a small plane, a lot of times, private plane, after game day, flying to whatever location, and flying home right after that. Just crazy schedule. All right, if we got to get into this, I guess we can. I see you, Teddy D, down there. You guys see Teddy D? Anyone on here have a creative suggestion for the new name of our live Gamecock, the most interactive mascot in all of sports? When the story popped out, I told you guys, it's the most South Carolina story ever. I put it all the way down here at the bottom of my rundown, of my little graphics to run. Gamecock live mascot mess. This is Troy says yes, but I can't say it on here. Classic Clemson response there. Or Teddy D is talking about. Just name him Thomas. I love it. This is the most ridiculous thing ever, right? Like Mike the Tiger is the LSU Tiger, right? Mike. So Thomas the Gamecock would be hilarious after Sir Big Spur. But it's everything that's attached to it. It's not ridiculous that if you have a live Gamecock, it's a great little prop there, right? It's a great prop for the visuals on game day. It's all part of the pageantry. The live mascots are again part of what we were talking about at the beginning, part of what makes college football great. You got Uga at Georgia, you got Smokey up at Tennessee, Mike the Tiger. Trying to think of other ones that pop in my head. Ralphie's the best one at Colorado. Bevo at Texas. These are notable names, right? These are recognizable. But the fact that there's a legal issue between the former owners and the new owners of the live on the sidelines at South Carolina, and they're not going to be able to use that old name, and they're looking for a new name, and they say that's going to pop out here before September 3rd, and now everybody's got an opinion about what that new name should be. Exactly. Well, Jot, great point. Definitely could be worse from a headline standpoint. Like, you don't want Corey Rucker likely out for the season opener, like Shane Beamer was saying last night. But that is not what has been the trend, I guess, now for Gamecock football in years past. Last year was Luke Doty, starting quarterback. Not going to be able to play. You got to make a grad transfer your quarterback. Year before that, Marshawn Lloyd, big-time prospect at running back. Teammates were already saying, boy, you're going to have fun watching this guy. Torn ACL, out for the season. So maybe it's really representative of where Gamecock football is right now. In unfamiliar territory from the last several years, being in a place feeling good about the program and the trajectory, but got to have something to argue about, some kind of conflict to get into. And that's what this thing has turned into. And I had to read about it because I knew it would come up today, and I felt like it was my responsibility to address it, right? A bunch of outlets have put out there, hey, like exactly what Teddy D said. Anybody got a great name for him? And that's the thing, right? I've noticed this doing shows. When you have a 3-hour radio show like I've done before, when you do this for 2 hours, it's a relatively contained entity, right? You got a start time every day. You got an end time. We get on here. We have some fun. Bat some ideas around. Ken's, welcome in. Good morning to you too. But when you have hosts and then maybe you have a producer or you have the ability to bring comments in or not, it can stay a relatively controlled deal. Now, if you listen to my first radio show way back in the day, me and Matt Berry, you might say, no, it gets out of control pretty quick, and I would agree with you. But it did, and that was part of the beauty of that thing. Kind of controlled chaos. But when you go to the internet and you throw up, hey, you guys got suggestions, or let's put a poll out there. We've got these names. You guys bet, or you guys weigh in on what you like the most. Well, when you don't have an end to that, and it's just, hey, before the first game, we're going to put out a name. Oh. And that's where we are with this Sir Big Spur saga. Oh, Jason, I heard you were doing an all-day marathon next Friday. Interesting, Jason. Interesting. DC says, it's a good show when people are asking for another hour. Thank you, DC, I think. Jason, you keep listening to where you're hearing those rumors about all-day marathons on Fridays. 8 to 10 seems like a solid time slot. This goes into this conversation, right? Because when a subject goes on longer than it needs to, then it turns from, this is maybe a notable story, or it's fun to think about, some names and the whole thing. I think it's gotten to for a lot of people to the next level of, come on, man. This is ridiculous. Yeah, 8 to 10, 14 hours on Friday. Jason's asking for, sure. That's simple. 8A to 10P. Nothing to it. That would be about like I would sum up how this thing has gone. But I had to read it last night. The state newspaper has the article out there, the entire backstory of what has led the way in some of these social media polls. And that, like, some journalists, some reporters have gotten out there and shot down the idea that Cock Commander will be the name of the new live mascot, just to see people's reaction on there. It's a great snapshot into how people interact on social media. Like, you get into this thing and you're throwing out your opinions and you're shooting down other names. You're saying, no, Like Darius Clucker has been put out there, right? People are all in on that. I even saw Darius Rucker comment and just kind of seemed like he giggled with the idea of that. And Teddy D, not that I am advocating that this show should be only a serious thought exercise for 2 hours every day from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. or whenever you listen a little later in the day, maybe, or watch. I'm certainly not advocating for that. That's not what I want this show to be. It is not that. But then I feel like the conversation about the live mascot is on the other end of that serious spectrum, right? That is when it just has gone, it has completely gone on tilt and just way off the rails for me. If you're 100% invested in the name that you think the live mascot should be for the Gamecocks, and you will not hear anything else, and you're fighting people on social media all day about it, or you've written the athletics department, you've emailed, you've done what, maybe actually penned the letter, right? Gone to the quill and ink, obviously, what you got to do these days. Most South Carolina story ever. But you're right. Jot's right. Definitely could be worse. But it and even as I say this, my brain wants to stop me. The backstory about the cock commander suggestion is pretty interesting. Just so you can be an informed college football fan. Like, this is taking it to the next level, right? Well, and this might actually be how you can separate the casual fan. And I've seen this phrase pop out, and I think it might be from a Late Kick with Josh Pate, which is continuing to, it seems to me on social media, it has taken the spot. It is the kind of the authority on college football for a lot of people. I love the idea that kind of an independent show in a lot of ways has just proven time and time again. Josh himself has proven time and time again, like, he's the guy to go to for college football stuff. And the most ridiculous example, and he even tweeted about it and put the video out there, is how ESPN has Stephen A. Smith and the Mad Dog yelling at each other, and Mad Dog saying that he doesn't think Nick Saban's the best college football coach of all time, and then he's looking down at his notes and saying Ara Parseghian was the best coach. And it's just how ridiculous, and I talk about it all the time. And I thought even I was going over the top and probably being unfair to those type of national shows where they just pound on the desk and yell at each other and say ridiculous stuff. Well, that's the best example, right? It just is it's a satire, a farce of itself. And it looks like even that Mad Dog knows it while he's doing it. Almost doing it tongue in cheek and is a caricature of himself. But those of us who love college football, we can take offense to that in a lot of ways, right? Like, this is the way that you're talking about college football and the worldwide leader of sports, and a show that doesn't take itself overly seriously, maybe. I don't even know. I think is it Face Off, or I don't even know what it's called. I never watch those shows because it turns into that most of the time. Just ridiculous, over the top yelling. But I brought up all of that because I think the Late Kick with Josh Pate, I've seen on social media calling casual football fans just casuals. So this is the way, this is the test for you, because obviously if you're in on this show and you're doing it nearly every single day, you're not a casual college football fan, and especially a casual Gamecock fan. We wouldn't be here. The casual fans just like to get out to a tailgate, right? I like to be in the scene. Oh, I love college football. Oh, yeah, what do you think about Spencer Rattler coming in, or and how he brought his teammate, kind of got him here and the whole thing? Who's his teammate, right? If you get one of those, then you know it's a casual. I love it. I love it in one way, and it's so obnoxious in another way to turn your nose up and to say, no, I'm an authoritative football fan and the rest of you are just casuals. So that's the way my brain works, by the way. But my point is, this cock commander thing, if you know the backstory on it, you're certainly not a casual college football fan. And I didn't know it until I read it last night. State newspaper putting the article out about it. When you have to get into the deep dive background of why, I had no idea why would that be an option, right? But apparently it comes from the student newspaper, the old Gamecock, which it's not called the Gamecock anymore. But back in 2004, one of the student workers there, one of the student journalists, put in a caption to a picture of Cocky with the tiger burn behind it, I think, the week of Carolina Clemson. And it was just as a placeholder, right? This happens a lot of times in life in general, right? You just have a placeholder. You throw in something just to hold the place before you're going to actually fill in the information that needs to be in there. And just because I think just trying to get a laugh or just trying to entertain himself, he put the caption of the picture of Cocky, I am the cock commander, and then another line, and then even like some Spanish at the end, yo soy cock commander, I think, just to be ridiculous, and probably at that point was working too many hours, or just the creative juices might not have been filtered in the proper direction, so we used it right there. There you go. And before he could change it, or he thought he changed it, I think, and went and just wrote something much more generic, appropriate for print, it actually got printed and became a bit of a cult following or saying on the campus of South Carolina 18 years ago. And now here it is back. Morning to you, Roger. So if you have anyone who raises their eyebrows, or if you're like me and you're like, what? Why would that be an option? Why is this a popular choice? Well, I can now see the backstory. It's a beautiful story, Anthony. It says it is. It kind of is. It is what is beautiful about college football. Serious, but not so serious, right? But just everything that it's become. In fact, the fact that the New York Post has picked up the story and the whole thing, it's so ridiculous. Again, part of the beauty of college football for sure. So if Teddy, you brought it up. I'm blaming you this morning. I guess I need to ask you, are you backing a specific name for the live mascot? And do you have the strong opinion? Are you going to die on that hill? One way or the other. I love, just name him Thomas. It's fantastic to me. I mean, it's hilarious. Mike the Tiger at LSU. He's Mike. They're not trying to overthink it. I don't even know where you would go with that, right? Some sort of I'm stuck in Daniel Tiger land with my 2-year-old, so maybe that's where my brain is, or Tommy the Tiger, the Frosted Flakes guy. Yeah, and that's part of the whole thing, right? Part of the whole backstory. It's been a while. The live Gamecock has been on the sideline a long time now. And that was the thing. Those original owners started getting older, and they needed someone else to do it. And that's where the beef happened with whatever the thing is on the top of the rooster that cools off the rooster. But apparently a real fighting Gamecock doesn't have it. So the old owners, they cut it off, but the new owners think that's cruel. And that's the whole beef, right? And you can't make this thing up. And even as I'm saying it, I am dying a little bit inside, I think. Yeah, Cluck Norris, Marco Polo, or Pollo, if you're into the Spanish, or Cock Commander. So, Anthony, you're good with all three of those? Is that what you're saying? Cocky Jr.? Yeah, I don't think that's been suggested at all. Maybe that's what it'll go with. I've seen this suggestions. Why don't you just go like Sir Spur instead of Sir Big Spur? or something really understated. You don't have to worry about it. Roger saying Phil Kornblut. Ran a Twitter poll. Out of the 4 choices, the winner was Dr. Pecker. It's so dumb. Teddy D says, I'm lacking the creativity, but I lean toward Little George. Definitely open to more creative thinkers. Wow. It just amazes me. That's where we are. But again, part of what makes college football so great. All right, let's get into more of the football discussion. Unless you guys, feel free to keep throwing those things out there, right? And and that's another thing too that I've tried to avoid now, and having had a little bit more experience. Like back in that first radio show that I was talking about with you guys 15 years ago now, that we would have completely hopped on this thing and probably started some sort of campaign for one or the other. I mean, we'll probably call him Barney, right? If we're talking about Williams-Brice being the barnyard. Barney the Rooster, for sure. I could see. I mean, this is probably right up our alleys at that point, because you got to remember, I was doing, both Matt Berry and I were doing television full time. So the radio gig was just fun. It was just our time to get in there and mix it up, man. And anything that was kind of off the beaten path, if you will, we would have latched onto, and I feel like that was our lane back then. And now that with the internet, with Twitter, this was pre-Twitter. Certainly I was on there anyway. With the advent of that, the tone has changed completely. Like everybody can do that all the time. So to have a show kind of based on that is almost redundant. And that's why the conversation, I think, can really get people frustrated real quick in 2022. Jason's on board with you, DC. General Thomas. No, Chris, that's part of the point, right? Just flip Cock Commander around. Bryce or Willie B, Josh suggests. Yeah, it was ridiculous back in the day, Jason. Ridiculous. But just bring that up because it seems to be that would completely have dominated. But the fill in the blank Friday today, so I could have said, what should the new name of the live mascot be? And we could have done that for a couple hours. But I couldn't. I can't do it at 44. Maybe when I was 27, 28, whatever it was back then. So gone the much more straight-laced, right down the middle there. What I'm looking forward to most this college football season is. That's the fill in the blank Friday. And leaving it open to everybody, like Troy says, besides his team, he's looking forward to October 8th, Texas A&M, Alabama. Great answer. Great college football, kind of serious answer as well. If you want the feel-good answer, more than a game, AJ going to Williams-Brice with my daughters. Fantastic answers, both of them. Interested in hearing yours as we go through some superlatives. I think now is a great time to do it. This time next Friday, it'll be more about, all right, what do you think is actually going to happen in the game? Much more Georgia State specific talk. Obviously, we won't get into too many X's and O's. Jamias Williams does play for Georgia State. Sean Elliott is the head coach there. So we will talk more specifics with Georgia State, certainly, than we will with Charlotte or South Carolina State, I assume, just because of the direct connections to the Gamecock football program in Elliott and Jamias Williams. And fascinating that their paths have come back to Williams-Brice Stadium, isn't it? But also, kind of in honor of Fill in the Blank Friday, let's go with some superlatives, huh? If you look at the 12-game schedule, what do you rank as the most important game this year? You want to tell me it's game number 1 with Georgia State? I'm not going to fight you. Like, this is obviously, there is no wrong answer. There are just more supported answers than others. You look back to last year, what was the most important game? You can make a case for multiple ones, right? The one that I think is probably, if we did a poll, what would get the most answers or what would get the most support, the most votes, would be Florida last year. And I got no problem with that answer. I think I probably said that before. And if you nailed me down and said you had to pick one in 2021, year one of Shane Beamer, most important game, I would go Florida. But if you want to tell me it was East Carolina, I got no problem with that. Because just imagine if South Carolina had not won that game, had not figured out a way to win somehow with as poorly as they played that day, I think that the tone around the program would have been that much more negative. Did you guys hear Shane Beamer the other day on the Welcome Home show? Brought up World War II. There was an emblem there, basically, of the organization that kind of predated the CIA, I think. Was talking about spies and how the Allies tried to put spies in Europe, and the number one thing that they were getting those spies to do was to kind of sow negativity. They said that was the most important thing they could do, the number one weapon, right? He asked his team, what's the number one weapon to use against the enemy? He mentioned negativity. I think the negativity around the Gamecock program, had they lost at East Carolina, which wasn't a good college football team last year, early in the season, early on in Shane Beamer's tenure, I would have made it difficult. More difficult for sure. But then I would argue on the other side that Florida win would have balanced that out that much more. So I'm going Florida for 2021 as most important game, just as a reference now to predicting things in 2022. I don't think that'll be the most important game in 2022 as we sit here right now. I think that one's it's a pretty, I don't know if it's an easy answer. You can go a lot of different ways here, and I'm interested in where you guys go. Roger says, seeing the steady progress the Carolina football program makes, even if it's just 7-5, I'm excited to see it. Love the direction it seems to be headed in for a change. So the question then becomes, all right, which game specifically are you pointing towards in 2022? You can go a lot of ways here. To me, off the top of my head, especially recently with the comment that popped out from SEC Media Days and Marty and McGee, I'm going October 8th for the Gamecocks. Kentucky on the road. Now, you lose that game, and it's not the most important game of the season, right? And so that is also one of the ways you can look at this thing. If you want to go week 2 in Arkansas, that's a strong, strong argument, I think. You win week 2, and your ceiling just goes up in a big way. Steven also went on Kentucky. I think that's where I'm going as well. If it was a different team, and if South Carolina was a different program, I wouldn't go there. And that goes into that comment, right? That goes into the reaction of that comment. The South Carolina perspective of the Kentucky football program. And if South Carolina is going to be relevant nationally, certainly you got to be you got to be above Kentucky. There is no scenario, I don't think, where any Gamecock fans feel like any Gamecock fan feels like Kentucky can be ahead of South Carolina and South Carolina can be nationally relevant. Chris in on Kentucky as well. Steven, if we beat Kentucky, I think it builds momentum for the last half of the season. Well, no doubt about it. Doing it on the road, doing it against the team that was picked to finish second in the East. Need to end that losing streak, Chris says. Yeah. That's another great point too, Kens. Would a loss to Missouri be more impactful than a win at Kentucky? You want to make the case for Mizzou? I got no problem with that, man. South Carolina needs to beat Missouri. Point blank. Done and done. And let's look. So this is also where you can get into the minutia of, right, when the game is and what the environment might be, right? Let's get into the specific weeks of the schedule. I got the first few weeks down in my head, no doubt, but I don't have 1 through 12 specifically, and I'm good with that right now. Taking it week by week, people. Not a big look ahead or look behind guy, even though I've been a countdown guy this week, annoyingly. Total hypocrite. All right, here we go. Kentucky game October 8th, like I mentioned. So kind of smack in the middle of the season. Another reason I put that in there, it is game number, let's see, you got 3, 4, 5, 6. Missouri is game 8. It is homecoming on October 29th. You don't win that game. The math doesn't work out well for South Carolina this year, right? By and large, unless Missouri shocks the world and somehow looks a lot more like the team that's picked to finish second instead of second to last, unless they come out of nowhere. But if you don't win that game, how you get to 7 wins is what I would ask. I know Carolina got to 7 wins last year without beating Missouri somehow, but you don't beat Missouri at home. Certainly you don't feel like you're going to win at Florida. You're going to beat Tennessee at home and not beat Missouri at home. Yeah, so I like that answer a lot, Kens. Believe it or not, Rogers says, I'd love to see USC be competitive against teams like Georgia and Clemson, even in losses, and Kentucky is important. Absolutely. Would love a win there. The Toaster putting in East Carolina had a winning record last year, got a bowl bid. That doesn't mean what it used to. I don't think that's impressing anybody. Like, does that mean they're a good college football team? Not in my mind. How many teams do we see at 6-6 bowl games before Christmas? Just because you made a bowl doesn't mean you're a good college football team anymore. So, of course, you want to see Carolina be more competitive. And I think ideally that's how the 2022 Gamecock football team will end up being measured, and the program will be measured by being more competitive in losses. But you got to get some wins to go along with that as well. And that's why I think Kens is absolutely correct. A loss to Missouri could be more impactful than a win at Kentucky, especially with where it is in the schedule, right? Because how I see it working out is you beat Georgia State, not a guarantee, but you're a 12-point favorite from a Gamecock football standpoint for a reason. You go to Arkansas, where I think it'll be close to a double-digit underdog for South Carolina, if not for sure. You'll certainly be a double-digit underdog against Georgia the next week at home. And then you get Charlotte and South Carolina State before the SEC slate starts. You got 2, 4, 6 in a row starting at Kentucky on October 8th. You won't be getting a bunch of credit for winning your non-conference games to that point. 3-2, I think, is the likely record for Carolina going to Kentucky. You win that game, you're 4-2. Then you got Texas A&M at home, never beaten them. Let's say 4-3. But then if you were to lose against Missouri the following week, you would drop to 4-4. You go win at Vanderbilt, and then you got Florida, Tennessee, and Clemson. That's a 5-7 season if you don't beat Mizzou. To me, that might be the swing game to be 500. If you want to be a 500 team, you got to beat Mizzou. Absolutely. So Kens might be he might have me rethinking it. I guess it just depends on the way that you're thinking about this, right? If you think it's most important that you just get to 500 to begin with, yeah, I think Missouri at home, absolutely. If you're thinking that is almost a baseline, you're more confident that that's going to happen, then you go to Kentucky. I think that's a fair way to look at it for sure. Teddy D says, if the over-under in Vegas on our first conference win was October 28th, would you bet over or under that date? Over being after, under being before. Whew. I would say, typically, you're basically saying Missouri, right? So the opponents before that, Texas A&M, Kentucky, Georgia, and Arkansas. Yeah, that to me is the rub with South Carolina football in 2022. I understand the optimism, the program headed in the right direction, the bowl win, Spencer Rattler, transfer receivers, transfer running back. You got guys in places for sure. You have everything going in the right direction, but those first four SEC games, you're an underdog. And pretty significant underdog, I think, if we look at this thing, how Vegas is going to look at it. At Arkansas, Georgia at home, at Kentucky, Texas A&M at home. The first time you're going to be favored, I think from a Vegas standpoint, like Teddy D's coming at, is game number 5 in the SEC with Missouri at home. So I think most Gamecock fans are hopeful that you're going to go under, right? That you can at least go 1-3, and 1-3 is not going to impress anybody, but somehow beat Kentucky or Arkansas or Texas A&M in that mess, right? Just beat Kentucky, Jason says. I miss the days when that game was an easy W. Yeah, that's changed a bunch. Jot, Arkansas, 4-1 going into Kentucky with a win over Arkansas feels much different than 3-2 with just wins over FCS schools. And Georgia State, not technically an FCS school anymore. I think, Jot. Charlotte, the same way. But I understand where you're coming from. It certainly would be that feel, right? And, it would be a massive difference, wouldn't it? Arkansas on the road, week 2? No doubt about it. So Kentucky, Missouri, Florida, Arkansas, swing games. Tennessee, I'd almost put in that group, kind of like presidential elections, the swing states this year, Roger. Yep, and so I went the other way. I've got Arkansas in the likely to lose list and Tennessee on my list with Kentucky, Missouri, and Florida as toss-up games. So 4 likely to wins, those 3 non-conference games, Georgia State, Charlotte, South Carolina State, and Vandy. 4 likely to lose, just from a program standpoint right now, an outlook, a projection in 2022, Texas A&M, Georgia, Clemson, and Arkansas. And then you got the 4 in the middle. And then you start doing the math, you win all 4 of those, you go 8-4, really good season. You win 3 out of 4, go 7-5. To me, still a pretty good season. You start getting less than that, you don't pull an upset out of that likely to lose group, which Carolina absolutely did last year. I was doing the math last year and thinking 5-7. Clearly, Carolina did better than that, but never thought they would beat Florida or Auburn. Thought they would beat Missouri. So that's where I'm at with the most important game. Love to hear more of your thoughts on that if they pop up, if you start seeing things a little differently. So let's move on from most important game. Next, we'll move to most important player as we're about to move into hour number 2. So before we would do that, wanted to reset a little bit. Let you hear one more time from Chris Phillips, the Spurs Up Show, talking about expectations, since that's what we're breaking down, the 2022 schedule right now. Get his take on the 2022 expectations for the Gamecocks. Right back after this, Tim Hill, unrestricted free agent, on a Friday, 8 days away from Gamecock football kicking off.
The difference this year, what feels so good, Tim, last year we had off-field reasons to be hyped in regards to our coaching staff. This year, we got real on-field reasons to be excited. And like, that's exciting. It's exciting to go into a season and be able to point to things on the field and say, because I've given you the pessimistic chicken curse view, we might go 6-6. I could turn it back, put on my garnet glasses, Tim, and say, why can't this team go 9-3? I mean, why can't they? You know, why can't they be the Arkansas of last year, the surprise team of this season? And
it could happen. We'll continue to discuss, and looking forward to more of your opinions as we roll on. First, wanted to tell you about a sponsor, a supporter of this show, and Freedom Primary Care, who I trust to take care of my family in these times because they value freedom. That's why they put it in their name, and it is much different than other situations that you might find yourself when it comes to healthcare. They're not there to pressure you into any certain decisions or routes of care. They are there to help you and responsible to you, but not responsible for you. To me, that is health in a nutshell, and that is why I trust Freedom Primary Care. I trust them to care for my family. If you're looking to go down the naturally minded route of care, they'll present you all of those options and take you down that path. If you're more traditionally minded, then they can point you down that direction as well. Either way, you're going to make the decision. You have the freedom to make the decision about your health care. To me, that is obviously the way it should work, and Freedom Primary Care values that. That's why I am happy that they are supportive of this program and hope that you consider checking them out. 803-627-2447. They're up in Fort Mill, South Carolina, right near me right now. If you are not in the area, certainly telemedicine options are out there. Check them out. Again, you can give them a call, 803-627-2447. That is Freedom Primary Care. All right, back to our primary discussion here. Gamecock football 2022, as we're 8 days away on a fill-in-the-blank Friday. What are you most looking forward to this college football season? Feel free to go to Twitter if you want to weigh in on that. You can do it right here on the program as well. The YouTube, Facebook live streams give you that live chat option. I can pop your comment right in, and we can make it very simple that way. So we've done most important game. Feel like you got two real options there, Kentucky or Mizzou, for a lot of us. Depends how you're looking at that thing. Missouri at home, I think, is more of a must kind of win. I think that's fair to say. But if you're going to have a special type of season, the more important game, you might look at it October 8th at Kentucky. And that's a great point Teddy D brought up, right? I mean, especially knowing you're going to be an underdog those first four SEC games. You go 0-4 in the SEC to start. That is a difficult thing to overcome. I don't care what type of solid foundation you have in your program. Losing stinks, and negative momentum does build on itself. It's difficult to overcome. So another reason why I'm going to stick with October 8th at Kentucky. But yeah, you don't want to win that one and then turn around and lose to Missouri at home, for sure. No doubt about it. So let's move on from most important game to most important player. As York's weighing in this morning with a happy Friday game. Of course, Troy, and he knows it's sounding like coach speak, but the most important game is the first game. All right. Oh, okay. Jot's convinced now. He's going season hinges on Mizzou. Love it. Okay, so let's move from games to players. And I think from the South Carolina standpoint, how a 100% of people following Gamecock football don't have the same most important player, I have no idea. Let's not overthink this. It is clearly Spencer Rattler wearing the number 7 jersey, the guy taking the snaps. Quarterback, if it's not the most important position in sports, it's number 2. I've heard that discussion a long time ago. It was hockey goalie, right? Has the most impact. You want to say pitcher in baseball? okay. But I think maybe as the game has become more and more pass happy through the years, I think the prevailing wisdom is, the prevailing thought out there is it's quarterback. And so you can't overthink this thing. So let's move from the most important player to the second most important player. I think that's where it gets much more interesting from a Gamecock football conversation standpoint. It is a given. Let's make it a given. We all understand. Not just even if you are a casual football fan, I think you would have to agree. Spencer Rattler, no doubt. So who is your second most important player to Gamecock football this year? Just like the Clemson answer to this is very obvious as well. It's DJ Uiagalelei. Case closed. Don't try to overthink it. Don't try to show me how smart you are. Very simple. We saw it last year. Quarterback play wasn't good. Clemson wasn't dominant. Clemson wasn't the Clemson they had been in years past. And you look squarely at the quarterback. And I get it. There were other factors that went into it. The weapons around him weren't quite as good and the whole thing. Yes, no doubt about it. You can't just say 100% his fault that Clemson lost 3 games last year. But if you have to point to one thing that was more at fault than others, obviously it was the quarterback. South Carolina definitely needs better quarterback play than what you've seen in years and years. Troy, we talked about that scenario. I talked about that with Chris a lot. If South Carolina somehow loses Georgia State, the wheels fall off before you get going. No doubt about it. Because then you're looking at that SEC schedule, those first 4 games, especially, a little differently. Those spreads being hovering right around double digits. I'm guessing the Arkansas game in game number 2 goes up to more than a couple of touchdowns real quick, doesn't it? That Georgia spread starts to get maybe ridiculous, and those are ridiculous numbers in the mid-20s. Our 10th year linebacker, York nominates. Hope he can stay healthy. I'm talking about Sherrod Green, I assume. Always thought linebacker play was the reason for our run-stop woes. I'm pretty sure that's what he meant there. Craig, good morning to you, sir. Good to have you in. Going Gamecock superlatives, college football superlatives this morning. Most important game was the most recent discussion. Now moving on to most important player. I think we all can agree Spencer Rattler is the clear-cut number 1 there. So let's go to the second most important player for Gamecock football. Sherrod Green going to be important. He's way down on my list. I mean, because we saw Ernest Jones, who's clearly a good linebacker, just won the Super Bowl. But he couldn't do it all himself. I feel like when you get to that point, your defensive line has had to pave the way for your linebackers to make play. If you're to make plays, if your defensive line can't do that, then your linebacker, he might end up with a bunch of tackles. But that doesn't mean it's been a good day on defense necessarily. Oh, interesting. Craig, right in there. Zach Pickens and Devontae Reed. So Reed being the transfer safety from Central Michigan who solidified a starting spot alongside R.J. Roderick in the back. Zach Pickens up front. And being talked about in a big way from Shane Beamer, great team leader, NFL-type guy. But the defensive line has been a problem, especially on the interior where Zach Pickens plays. It has not been a strength for South Carolina football. That becomes a strength. Then York, I think, Sherrod Green, linebackers, seen as much more of a strength. Craig, maybe if you get better safety play back there, you're not going to get much better than Jalen Foster last year. But that can allow the defensive line maybe a little bit more freedom or give them a little bit more time to get to the quarterback. So to me, that's not those two guys aren't the most important players on the defensive side of the ball. To me, it's the projected first-round draft pick there on the defensive side of the ball for the Gamecocks and Cam Smith, getting all the preseason accolades. You got to have him be him first. I think it's such an important thing in the SEC specifically. It was part of what made those Gamecock defenses back in the heyday, the top 10 seasons, the SEC East Division winning season, so good that you had guys like Chris Culliver, Stephon Gilmore, Akeem Auguste, even back in the day. You had guys that could lock them up on the outside, man-to-man. Victor Hampton for a little bit in there, I think, too. Cam Smith needs to be the guy he is being talked up to be. You can't have that guy giving up big plays that deflate your team. And again, especially at that position. Ideally, you don't hear about Cam Smith all year long from a Gamecock perspective because he's good enough to go away from. He's good enough to stay away from. Teams just understand that's not where you want to attack the South Carolina defense. It gets concerning, I think, if you see a team like, well, Auburn obviously did it to their own peril, right? Going after J.C. Horn a couple of years ago. And it cost them the game. Hesitate to say this, Teddy D says, but my number 2 most important player, VIP he's going with all the injuries we've seen, Luke Doty. He says he hopes he's wrong. Man, that is a scarred fan way to look at it for sure. I think very similar to Cam Smith, but him actually being on the field and just not being targeted a bunch, being silent in that way, is a good thing for Gamecock fans. Obviously, if Luke Doty does not become important, does not see the field very much, I think that's a very good thing for Gamecock fans. To Teddy D, that's almost a worst case scenario thinking. Whew. That is some negativity that I don't think Shane Beamer would endorse. So I'm going Cam Smith as most important player number 2. Spencer Rattler clearly being number 1. Now, if we're going to go back over to the offensive side of the ball, who you guys got? I think, again, I got to go to the guy that is being projected as a number 1 pick type guy. I got to go to Jaheim Bell on that side of the ball. You got to have your best guys being really, really good if you're going to have a good team. Simple to me. You got to start there. These guys are not proven enough, in my mind, for that to be a given. Maybe that's how you're thinking, right? Cam Smith, preseason All-American. He's definitely going to be the guy. I don't have to worry about him. In my mind, he's not as important because it's a given that he's going to play well. Jaheim Bell, what we saw the last game, you see more games like that, or if you're just saying the last game, he's obviously going to take that next step and is a weapon, extremely talented, very versatile, the whole thing. Not concerned about him. I get that. Not concerned about him. But you got to get big-time production from your big-time players consistently. So that's why it's a no-brainer for me. Spencer Rattler's the most important guy for Gamecock football in 2022. Defensive side of the ball, I go right to the most highly touted, and arguably talented guy in Cam Smith on the outside. And then going back to the offense, got to go Jaheim Bell. Teddy, I agree that was bad thinking. Sorry, I put it out there. Let's rock the nation and run the table. Classic shift. Well done, Teddy. Nice adjustment there. If you want to tell me it's Marshawn Lloyd at running back, I get it. I don't disagree necessarily, but I think you got to open things up for the run game. I think we've seen really good running backs for the Gamecocks in the past not have much of a chance. And then we kind of saw the opposite of that, right? I'm not telling you that Kevin Harris is not a really good running back, but the last 2 seasons with Kevin Harris is a great example. Last year, he didn't have much of a chance. The numbers just weren't there. The year before, they were over 1,000 yards in 10 games against all SEC competition. And it wasn't certainly all Kevin Harris deserved the credit for that production. The offensive line, the scheme, that was what Mike Bobo wanted to hang his hat on. They did the pin and pull on the offensive line, the blocking scheme. That was their identity. And they were able to do that consistently. It just wasn't good enough to win games. Rodgers going with Marshawn Lloyd as his most important guy. Would love to see him become the premier back he was projected to be when he signed. Craig, another good one. Josh Vann, no other wide receiver is proven. He has to be a rock. Completely agree with that. And again, that's if it goes into your thinking, right? If you are convinced that last year he already made that step and he certainly is going to be that guy, I get that. So you're in my head, I go to Xavier Legette. Maybe he's got to be the guy who steps up. But being the guy who steps up is a little bit different than being the second most important player, right? 5-way tie for Troy. Left tackle, left guard, center, right guard, and right tackle. Yeah. If we were just going position groups, no doubt about it, behind quarterback, the most important position group for South Carolina football in 2022. Across the board, not just on offense, but is offensive line. Because that kind of goes back to my thought process around Cam Smith on the outside. If your best player gets beaten, taken advantage of, doesn't make plays when he has the chance to. I think we saw it often with J.C. Horn in position to make interceptions. He didn't make those. And just how, man, everybody in the stadium just kind of gets deflated and says, oh, man, that could have changed things so much. And that North Carolina season opener where he was right there for an interception, goes right through the hands. I was sitting right basically behind that play. He was coming at me. I had the great angles. It was baffling how he didn't make that play kind of thing. And then almost how the other team too can just exhale, say, we got a break on that one. Let's take advantage of it and the whole thing. And anything that happens positive after that is almost a 2x situation, a bonus. But if you're just going straight position standpoint, if Spencer Rattler drops back against Georgia State and you see whoever it is on the outside, right? Jalen Brooks or Amarian Brown, whoever they're going to send deep on a first shot to take of the season, you see him have a step or two, and then Spencer Rattler doesn't have time to get the pass off, or Georgia State rush somehow affects the play enough that it's a few inches off and that thing doesn't get executed. I think a lot of all of that energy, enthusiasm, optimism, air goes out of the stadium. And we've seen that way too many times. Obviously not with Spencer Rattler, but with shots taken. The opportunity was there. The execution was not. Rodgers in on the offensive line. And along with that goes the run blocking, man. You gotta make holes. You gotta communicate so much better than what happened last year. Got to be on the same page. The expectation is there this year from the Gamecock fan base, with so many returning starters, so much experience along the line. A second year with the same offensive line coach, second year in the same offense. You can't explain last year away. First year with all of that. You can't do it the next year with the same guys, same coaches. It's an unacceptable explanation. Not that it was necessarily acceptable for a lot of Carolina fans last year. It was understandable. unacceptable. Just no. Can't stand for it kind of thing in year number 2. So that's how I see the most important position group for sure. Most important player, my vote goes to Cam Smith. Got votes for Zach Pickens, Devontae Reed, Luke Doty, Marshawn Lloyd, Josh Vann. Offensive line. Same thing at Clemson, Troy says. Yeah, no doubt, man. DJU is always going to get all the credit or all the blame, but we know better. All right, so on the other side of things, what about most underrated player? Or maybe position group. Maybe that's how your brain thinks. Most underrated. Who's going to be? I'd say Josh Vann became that player last year. Cam Smith kind of came a little bit off the radar. Who's going to be that person this year? Because Gamecock football is going to need a few of those guys. Juju McDowell, I think you could definitely say was a big-time underrated guy. I know he had already made a splash in preseason practice, and there was some video out of a guy making some plays and being referred to as a jitterbug kind of playmaker, going to get some playing time as a true freshman, which you didn't really see going into preseason camp last year. Who's going to be that guy this year? Maybe it is McDowell, even at this point. Most underrated player. I think that's where, yeah, you can go so many different ways with South Carolina right now. Who's going to be your pick, though? Who are you putting your money on, I guess, is basically how I'm asking this question. Boogie Huntley for Craig. It's a good one. Interior defensive lineman. Zach Pickens probably going to get most of the attention, you would think. It frees up a guy like Boogie Huntley to make plays. If he's making plays, if that interior defensive line is making plays, that's a good sign for Gamecock football. And Shane Beamer has said that he's very pleased with the defensive interior line. The interior defensive line, probably the better way to put that. It would be very difficult, I think, to pick out a specific offensive lineman here. I've seen Javon Gwynn talked about in that way. One of the guys that's been named a captain was taken to SEC Media Days. Tons of experience. One of the strongest guys, if not the strongest guy on the team. Interior offensive lineman. But if he can become an AJ Cann type guy, and Cann playing last night, now over with the Texans, and doing good things, continuing a really solid NFL career, being stuck with the Jags for the first part of it, now stuck with the Texans. Tough franchises and tough timing there for him. But still, really solid player in the NFL. High draft pick for a reason. Became the guy that South Carolina could rely on to run behind in the biggest situations. Was the best, became the best matchup. You got to get that type of guy on the offensive line this year. And Gwynn seems to be the likely choice for that. So I think I'll go there. I'll go Javon Gwynn. I'll go, because that goes back to our conversation about most important player. If you want to go a group, the offensive line, I think if you want to go one specific guy, nobody talks about an interior lineman typically unless there have been some tremendous grades the prior year and the coaching staff's really pumping them up. You don't hear the coaching staff going out of their way to talk about anyone specifically on the offensive line. At least I haven't. But I think Gwynn would be the first guy. So to me, he's got to step up. The entire offensive line has to step up. But if he can take that next step to being an NFL type guy, anywhere close to what AJ Cann became, then you have more of an identity on the offensive line. And that's the place where you get to. That's the place where good teams get to, right? Where it's not a secret necessarily what they're going to do in short yardage. It's just other team can't do much to stop it. Your guy's better than their guy. Even if you put two guys in there, your guy is going to be able to be good enough, and then your running back's going to be able to be good enough to read it and make the adjustment, and you can't stop what they're trying to do in those important moments in games. And that's where this Carolina football program has not been in so long. And I think that's what has fans so fired up about the recruiting news recently in the trenches, both offensive and defensive line. It's so deflating as a fan base when the game gets to those handful of game-deciding plays. And number one, you don't have an identity like last year. And having heard former Gamecock quarterbacks coach, co-offensive coordinator G.A. Mangus talk about you got to major in something, to not having a go-to guy, play, or identity really in a situation. Saw Rico Dowdle scored a touchdown in the Cowboys' last regular season game last week, and it looked a lot like Marcus Lattimore's short run, but he went low, barely got it to break the play into the end zone. But that was such an identity of those Spurrier teams, right? It was going to be run first, control the clock kind of deal. And if it wasn't Lattimore, it was going to be Connor Shaw pulling that thing, and you had to prepare for a lot as an opposing defense. And then if you were prepared for that and overplaying that, that's when Spurrier could throw the ball a little bit. Connor Shaw could pick apart a defense a little bit and use some weapons on the outside, which the Gamecocks did have plenty of then. But Will Muschamp's offense is never developing an identity outside. Going to be an RPO deal, going to give what the defense takes us. Wow. We all know what a problem that became, right? Well, what about 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2? What are you going to do? Well, it depends what the defense is doing. If the defense is taking away the run, that mindset from your head coach or from your offensive coordinator, that the defense can do that to your offense, I think we saw how that played out. And as I understand it, was the biggest difference in a lot of differences between the Steve Spurrier staff and the Will Muschamp staff. And not sure if we can say that has changed under the new change, the most recent head coaching change. I should go the other way. I can tell you that has not changed yet for sure. South Carolina has not, on offense, been able to develop the identity of this is what we're going to do. This is our strength. And they're not going to be able to stop it. What was it? The Welcome Home show the other day, 3rd and 1 that Shane Beamer was all ticked off about. Couldn't even pick up a yard. Kind of the rare, angry Beamer soundbite that we got to hear. One of the reasons why that show is definitely worth watching. But yeah, you can't have that consistently this season with the experience on the offensive line, with a guy that on paper comes in being able to throw the football too, is a guy that you have to respect as a defense, I think, more than Gamecock quarterbacks have been respected in years past, where you could say, hey, make Colin Hill beat us. Make Zeb Nolan beat us. Make Luke Doty beat us. Go down the list. Brandon McElwain or Perry Orth or Jake Bentley even. Yeah, let's see if you can beat us. I don't think defenses will be able to take that mentality in with Spencer Rattler taking the snaps back there. So Craig's going the offensive tackle spot opposite of Wanham. was going to say DJ, but that's obviously not his name. Dylan Wanham. And that's Tyshawn Wanamaker. And I forget the other guy in the mix there. But I think that one will end up probably being a group effort, it seems like, if they've gone this long. And it seems to be that Greg Atkins has the more of a group mentality as opposed to it's going to be our 5 guys and that's going to be it. I think he's much more willing to rotate more than other offensive line coaches in the past. Teddy D, I hope our place kicker turns out most underrated. We need every point. We need the ability to kick off through the end zone, things we've enjoyed in recent years. Good point, Teddy. No doubt about it. That's another thing, too, that a lot of programs, I think, ended up taking for granted, and Gamecock fans were always like, hey, why is their program, why can they find a guy to get a touchback nearly every single time, but South Carolina couldn't? And that has changed in years past, and I think you've just seen more and more kickers across the country with stronger and stronger legs, just better teaching and coaching, more emphasis on it. So, yeah, if you can't get a guy to do that, that's a red flag to me in college football in 2022. I don't think that's going to be an issue, because we didn't see Parker White kicking off here in recent years. We see Mitch Jeter pretty much being the guy. I think he might have gotten replaced a time or two. I think Rattler, Craig says, gets us 15 to 30 third down conversions during the season with his legs. With Doty not healthy, our quarterbacks just haven't been able to do that in years. That's a big deal. Oh, Craig, I would say if that number gets anywhere close to 30, that's dangerous. Oh, okay. So he amended that to 15 to 20. That's 1 to 1.5 per game pretty much in a 12-game regular season. I think that's fair. But you better be holding your breath on those, right? From a health standpoint. But totally fair. It reminds me of Connor Shaw. I think that's probably how many he got Carolina through the years or through the seasons in a season. But it also took a toll on him physically. So I don't know exactly. I think we'll learn how much confidence they have in Spencer Rattler's ability to protect himself, in Luke Doty behind him. I think we'll learn that by how many times he's put in that situation, right? Maybe he's put in the rollout situation, the old run throw option. Maybe De'Carrion Joyner will be put in that situation more this year. He wasn't put in it at all last year outside of the bowl game. Maybe that will be more of his role. I'd be surprised if we see that more than a handful of times. Or even a handful, right? We didn't see it last year. Only passes he threw were in the bowl game. So Rattler 1 as underrated, DC. Interesting. Marshawn Lloyd is number 2. See, I don't think either one of those guys you can consider as being underrated. I guess nationally for sure, Marshawn Lloyd might fit the bill. I guess if you're seeing, or you haven't seen much talk about Spencer Rattler, but it's out there. And I think it's out there at the level that Shane Beamer, Marcus Satterfield, the Gamecock coaching staff would prefer, in that it's not the headline. Beamer could have put Spencer Rattler out there a lot more in the public eye, right? Could have sent him to SEC Media Days. Could have him talking every offensive player media availability, but didn't do that. And I think kind of smartly so. Yeah, Troy still bitter about Connor Shaw getting too many first downs back in the day. Making all Gamecock fans smile, I think, this morning. And it wasn't just him. You can put Dylan Thompson in there too against Clemson, especially when he filled in for Connor Shaw. Was that the 2012 game maybe? So most underrated player. Offensively, going on the offensive line there with Javon Gwynn. Let's switch over to the defense for Carolina specifically. And that's where, if I went most important player in Cam Smith, I think most underrated player, I go somewhere else in the defensive secondary on the outside. Probably go Darius Rush. You want to throw Marcellus Dial in there. If I'm projecting the most important player to be the big-time first-round talent in Cam Smith, I think the logical way to think about that is that if defenses aren't going to target him, if they're going to go away from him, then they got to go to the other guys. And that's when those other guys have got to make plays too. Sherrod Green, Chris goes from the linebacker standpoint. Got it. But if I'm going to the outside, I can understand how you would go the exact opposite, because that was not the weakness, clearly, of the 2021 defense that led the SEC in pass defense, which a lot of coaches will tell you is a garbage stat because it just means you couldn't stop the run. You got to do that first. And so you're going up the middle, you're going a Boogie Huntley, you can go Zach Pickens even here. I know he's getting a little bit of preseason love, but nothing to the extent that you would, that I'm hearing Shane Beamer talk about. Like a guy who had a big NFL decision to make, and the whole thing decided he was leaning NFL and then decided to come back, and a big deal for Carolina. Like, to me, that's not the perception. There's no one talking nationally about Zach Pickens. I don't think anybody around the SEC is saying, oh, yeah, that guy is a really, really good player. Jordan Birch, Jordan Strawn on the outside, very important. I don't know if you can throw Birch in an underrated type situation being a 5-star guy, but from a preseason hype type of situation, I can see how you could get there. But that's going to be clearly job number one for this year's defense, and concern number one from the South Carolina perspective. You got to stop the run. You got to make sure you're not getting pushed around on the line. And so Shane Beamer has given fans the hope that that can happen, the optimism that it should happen, by saying much improved interior defensive line, looking good, feeling good about not just the talent there, but the depth. It's what you got to have in the SEC. Clearly, the recruiting, defensive and offensive linemen, and 6 out of the 8 there, 4-star guys here recently for South Carolina class of 2023. Shane Beamer was around back in the day, building up both lines, especially that defensive line that became dominant for Carolina from the recruiting standpoint. He knows. Well, they know. There's no secret there. So some of the superlatives for Gamecock football as we sit here 8 days away. Fill in the blank Friday. What I'm looking forward to most this college football season is, to me, it's just the feel that you get around a stadium where there is optimism, where there is excitement about the season moving forward, the program moving forward. I'm excited to feel that again for the first time in a while. Like, I was out at that Auburn game last year. There certainly was that feel, but not like it will be, having been at a bunch of season openers through the years, not like it will feel September 3rd, 1 week from tomorrow, going into the year. And it is unlikely to continue at that feel, that energy level through that game. At that peak, right? You're undefeated. There have been 0 bad plays. The ceiling is a lot higher this season than it has been in how many years? 4? I mean, last year it was, hey, hope this first-year head coach can win as many as he loses. That was really the ceiling. That was a realistic ceiling for South Carolina, and it hit, right? And then some with the bowl game. This year, the ceiling goes up a little bit, right? Goes up a lot for some fans. Up a little bit, I think, for most rational, reasonable people out there, logical fans. And that's the feel of that is during the tailgate for sure, York. It's the conversation. It's the, hey, I'm not just here for the food or boozing. I am here because I'm genuinely excited about what that team can do in the 3 to 4 hours that we'll be in the stadium. York says, then getting on the ramp with folks who I'm unsure of their names, but they too are family. So are you talking about, are you watching the game on the ramp, York? Are you one of those? Or are you just making the walk? Those that stand on the ramp are fascinating, man. That is a unique place in college football to be. If you're one of those, what I'm looking forward to most this college football season is standing on the ramp there in the corners of Williams-Brice Stadium watching those games. That is you get a lot of interesting opinions on those ramps for sure. I mean, that is dedication in a big way. Oh, you like that view? Good for you, York. It's good to know that one of the unrestricted free agents here on the show will be manning a spot on the ramps. Yeah, Roger, your dad wasn't the only one. He says, my late father used to get so nervous watching Connor Shaw run, concerned he'd get hurt. That's what I miss most, watching games on TV with him. Oh, good stuff, man. And that's part of what goes into it for me going to games, what I'm looking forward to most, doing that experience with, I get to do that with my dad. And AJ mentioned he's looking forward to doing that with his daughters. So now, Roger, I guess it'll be a matter of you passing on the tradition in a lot of ways, kind of paying it forward, what you got to experience with your dad. Chris says, I've stood on the ramp one time, the Kentucky game where we were both ranked, one of the loudest games I've been at. You're not talking about I recently saw that one on social media, the Andre Woodson game back in the day. I think it was 8-11 in the country. Was it that one, Chris? And I think that was the one where Norwood scored 2 touchdowns on defense that day. York, off-season conditioning program. Atta boy. That was it, Chris? Nice. We nailed that one. Been doing 2 hours a week on the stepper to get ready. First, I read that as 2 hours a day. 2 hours a week, that seems much more realistic. Good for you, York. To be in the stadium with 70,000 plus people, especially in 2022 now, where fortunately, none of our off-season conversation has had to be about any type of heavy health implication stuff. None of it. Like what I mentioned it 2 days ago, Monday this week. Is that when Monty Lee talked? Yeah, Monday this week. This week has flown by the way, for me. Maybe it's because it's the second week of school and kids are starting up sports. I don't know what it is, but this thing got to Friday real quick. Maybe it's this countdown getting down to single digits. I don't know what it is. Being able to talk football with you guys being as active in the live chat have you been as you've been. I don't know. I loved it, by the way. But Monday, had to mention that Monty Lee was doing a Zoom press conference instead of a regular press conference because Mark Kingston had recently tested positive for COVID, and they were just doing it out of an abundance of caution and the whole thing. That's, I think, the only time, fortunately, we've talked about any kind of COVID effect. Whereas this time last year, it was a big deal with guys having to sit out and protocols and the whole thing. Obviously, the year before, we didn't even know if we would have a season about this time that year, 2 years ago, right? It was still, I think, in doubt, or maybe Greg Sankey had come out and really set the tone and saved college football in a lot of ways, pushing everything back, but having a 10-game conference-only season. thank goodness we're where we are here in 2022. So to have 70,000 people plus 1 week from tomorrow, night game, being able to enjoy the first full day of college football from a tailgate standpoint. First game with the LED lights and the whole thing. First game where you had a full season of a coach that you could really get behind and feel like is yours for the first time in forever. A long, long time. To feel that energy, to be a part of that lead up to 2001, going to be fantastic. Troy says, my dad took me to my first game when I was 3 years old. I took my daughter to her first at 18 months, my granddaughter to her first at 9 months. I'm giggling because having the little kids recently, I think we took my second son. He's been the youngest when he was 2. And he cried, I think, during 2001, just freaked out, too loud. It just turns into a different type of experience when you have the really little ones. Yeah, I think my dad was brave enough to take me to my first game when I was 3. And I don't plan on taking my 2-year-old this year if we can avoid it. He might end up going. Actually, he probably is going to go to the Tennessee game. So he'll probably do it at 2, and then it'll turn into that situation. I think, fortunately, we'll have his grandmother there. Maybe she might decide just to hang out in the fairgrounds or the tailgating area and not even go into the game. Chris, my daughter's first game was a Georgia game. She was 3 to 4 months old. It's so ridiculous, right? But it just goes to the family tradition. Yeah, and I've seen this as a concern already, and it's so ridiculous with the way weather forecasts can vary so many days out. But that shows you how important, how much we're looking forward to this year. York says, hope the rain holds up so the fair weather fans will show up. That I saw this for the first time like 3 or 4 days ago. Looks like it might be a really wet season opener for the Gamecocks. 3 days out is where I'll start paying attention to a weather forecast. 3 days. Again, it's a lot like bracketology. Don't start giving me that mess in December. I don't want to hear it. It's ridiculous. We talk about late February. All right. Then it's merited. Gives the meaning to Gamecock since birth, Chris says. Yeah, when you take your daughter there 3 to 4 months old, and now she's on the sidelines cheering. Good stuff. Oh, now we're getting personal. Do you have season tickets, Tim? No, I don't, Craig. My dad has had them forever, and he is kind enough to let me mooch off of him. Happy National Dog Day to all dog owners out there. Tim, do you have a canine? We can barely take care of our kids. And my kids love dogs too, by the way. But fortunately, my sister lives around the corner. They have a dog. So I feel like we get the best of both worlds there. They got a boat too. It's fantastic. They take care of all the work. We get all the spoils. DC says, took my daughter to the Gilbert football game at 3 years old. Everything was cool until she saw a big chief. It was time to go. Yeah, that's all part of it as well. The early interactions with Cocky. I'm sure a lot of you with kids have been there too, right? You can point them out in the stadium, and that's definitely the best part of their experience, being able to see the mascot. And I'm glad we're having this mascot conversation now after doing the ridiculous live mascot name conversation earlier in the show. But then if there's ever the pregame or postgame, if you're ever actually close to Cocky with a small child, I think it's just the sheer size of that costume, and then the realization that, wait a second, this is getting in my space and the whole thing. It typically hasn't gone well with my kids. The 2 older ones, I think 5 is the age that they had to get to where they would even feel confident giving the high five. And I'm okay with that because it is a weird thing. There's something with the human mind that it doesn't quite feel comfortable with the big mascot costume. In my experience with kids, I think that's one of those survival of the fittest kind of deals. The fight or flight instinct kicks in. You're like, wait a second, this is kind of a monster. I think I need to go. Chris has had the same experience. Both my kids scared to death of Cocky when they were younger. Yeah. Remember, it's like, hey, look, we're safely up in the stands. Look at the mascot down there. Oh, that's great. Love that guy. Let's not get close. A couple of notes wanted to make sure to mention today. Chris Silva, did you guys see this? He's got his 4th organization in the NBA, signing with the Atlanta Hawks yesterday. Been with the Heat. The Heat traded him to the Sacramento Kings. That was a very brief stay. Went from the Kings to the T-Wolves. Then I think has gone back to the Heat and the T-Wolves here in the last several weeks or months. And that didn't last. So going to try to catch on with the Atlanta Hawks. He's played 69 games in his NBA career. We'll try to find a role with the Hawks organization. Good luck to Chris Silva. Again, underrated in that Final Four run, just what he provided that team and his role. And that's going to be one of the hallmarks. I don't know how I'm going to put it up on the show, but I feel like I got 2 sayings from Gamecock coaches now that really stick in my mind. Dominate your role that Monty Lee brought up the other day. I hadn't heard anybody else say, and maybe it's just the way that he said it and the situation he's in now, going from a head coach to an assistant coach. Dominate your role. He says I'm going to dominate my role here at South Carolina. I think that's a great saying to live by, because our roles shift, right? Throughout our lives, throughout whatever hat we're wearing at the time. Parent, child, brother, sister, employee, employer, manager, coach, whatever it may be, fan. Dominate your role. We'll see if Silva can find a role and dominate. His role back on that Final Four team, I guess is how I got off on that tangent, was so important and so integral to getting the Gamecocks there. I know Sindarius Thornwell and PJ Dozier, they do deserve most of the credit, but Chris, you don't get there without Chris Silva. Rebounding, blocking shots, being a physical presence, getting all the fouls, being able to defend down there, and then obviously doing it well enough to have an NBA career. Probably not quite at the level that he would like, and now gets a chance to find a role with the Atlanta Hawks. The state game of the weekend, high school football, I think by far is Dutch Fork at Spartanburg. See if the Vikings have anything for them. Yep, Ryan Clary on the call for that one, the voice of the Spartanburg Vikings, who went out of state, played a team from Georgia, I believe, in week 0 and got handed to them pretty good. Now, Dutch Fork played a really close game, which doesn't happen very often, hasn't happened very often in past years, against a team from the Charlotte area. They won by 3, I saw. So both with big time tests in week 0 in their first games. Spartanburg on the wrong side of it now at home. Yep, big game for them coming up tonight. Happy College Football Eve. Troy wanted to make sure everybody knows for week 1/2. No, we're not calling it week 1/2. And got to include cut the gummy in half. That is a good saying. It's not the one that I find that comes up in my life often, though. Dominate your role, find some joy. So dominate your role from Monty Lee and find some joy from Shane Beamer. Those certainly seem to be like words to live by in a lot of ways. Then there was one that popped up. I listened to this Bible in a Year. I try to listen to it every day. I'm way behind. But the story of Jonah and the whale, and there's something about does your anger do you well? Reminds me a lot of college football fan. Does your anger do you well? Those are the three sayings that keep resonating through my head these days. Dominate your role, find some joy. Does your anger do you well? Oh, nice. So thanks for the heads up on that one, Roger. Ryan Clary is a radio guy up in the upstate. I think it's ESPN Spartanburg. is the name of the station specifically. It was nice enough to have me on. I got to pump the show. That's how Roger got in on the show. Good to know, Roger. Jason says, go Dutch Fork. My daughter goes there. Son graduated there a couple of years ago. They've got to see a lot of championship high school football. A great example of how big an impact a coach can have with Tom Knotts coming down from the Charlotte area where he'd already won a bunch of state championships, seeing the Dutch Fork resources, that school being a good fit for him. And, man, what he's done there. Unbelievable. If you were like me and had gone and been around the Dutch Fork program before and now seeing it after. Wow, what a transformation. He deserves a ton of credit. DC, ready to piece it out, says, happy Friday, everybody. Going to be a fun week next week, no doubt about it. And Troy's going to continue to go on the week half thing. Well, next year you might have to do it a little bit before and immediately afterwards, not now that we're an entire week after. Or it is college football, and I guess there might be some college football people out there saying it week 0, but that's not how I'm seeing it described. Fortunately, we haven't gotten to that place in college football. Did you guys see this? And I only bring it up. I know it's a national story, has no local relevance, but I remember bringing it up at the time, right, maybe the day of the NBA draft, having read an article about Chet Holmgren, and just because of how he looks, how he plays the game, to me is nationally relevant a lot more than most basketball players. But he's the guy 7'4" at Gonzaga, ended up being the number 2 pick for the Oklahoma City Thunder, and now is out for the season with that Liz Frank injury. Looked like LeBron James, I think, stepped on his foot as he was going to the game. They were playing in a Pro-Am game. But the whole point of me bringing him up at the time was an article that I read about how Chet Holmgren was a unicorn, not just in his frame, but it was how his body moved. Like, I don't even know the best way to put that. Biomechanically, I think, that he had gone to this place in California and they specialize in how bodies, very specifically, biomechanically, like how you land when you step and how your joints and ligaments are going to react or being stressed, and how he was that much different than most his size, certainly that height. And therefore, he was much less likely to be injured than others. And here you go, out for the season. So much for that theory, huh? But that's a kind of a freak thing, I think. One of those things you can't anticipate. Unfortunate, I think, for sports fans in general, that you're not going to see a guy who just looks different, plays different than others. Not going to see him get a shot in his first season. Bummer news yesterday. Just wanted to point that out. Have a great weekend, Roger says. Everybody, he's got the smiley face on. If you don't have a smiley face going into this weekend, I don't know where you are right now. Please tell us how we can help on a fill-in-the-blank Friday, what I'm looking forward to most this college football season. I love the family connections with college football. Going to Williams-Brice Stadium with my daughters is how AJ started us off. It's a great way to finish as well. I'm also wanted to point out just the gratitude for us being where we are in 2022 as opposed to the last few seasons where it is a football discussion and we don't have to bring other things into it. But I do want to make sure that I am grateful for that and understand the significance of it this season, maybe certainly more now than I had pre-COVID stuff popping up the last several years. So maybe that's my answer to that. What I'm looking forward to most this college football season is being able to talk about college football without those much more serious issues having an impact on the game and then certainly on our world in a lot of ways. So we'll let that be the final thought this morning. tailgate equipment check this weekend. Attaboy, York. Let's go. Good call. Good words of wisdom out there. Make sure your tailgate stuff is ready to go. It's a good weekend to do that. You can almost have maybe a mock week, a mock game day tomorrow with some of those games. Austin Peay and Western Kentucky kicking us off at noon, 12:30 Northwestern and Nebraska over in Ireland. Something out there to get us going for college football as we're 8 days away from kickoff across the country. Appreciate you guys being a part of the program. Like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. Appreciate you spreading the word. If you know anyone who might be interested in sponsoring, certainly could use that as we continue to get into football season as well and try to crank this thing up to the next level. It is Tim Hill, unrestricted free agent, and that'll do it for this edition, August 26th, 2022. Appreciate you listening. We'll do it again next week when game week begins across the country. Dramatic ending. Bum, bum, bum.